You are listening to the Fly the W670 podcast. This is season 2, episode 77. Club's slow start in 2023. Don't forget to listen, download, review. Most importantly, subscribe to the podcast. Follow us on the socials, Fly the W670 on Twitter, Instagram, and Fly the W on Facebook, or email us at flythew670 at gmail.com. Crawly, happy Monday.
Yeah, it's just trying to get used to life without baseball all the time, but there's still postseason baseball, and we'll talk about that. But that's kind of fun to watch. I also was at an autograph show this weekend in Schaumburg and got to see and talked a little bit to Ben Zobrist and Joe Maddon. So always a good time.
Which show was that, Crawly?
That's the Schaumburg show. It's a new show. It was the first time that they had it. They had a ton of Chicago Bears on Saturday. It was like an 85 reunion. It was ridiculous.
There wasn't a lot of the reason I asked is there wasn't a lot of promotion, it didn't seem, for this thing.
In the right circles, yes, but it's whenever you have like the first show of something, it's never, you know what I mean? It's always kind of like they're putting it together and probably don't have as much money to do that. But I know Justin Fields was there, William Perry, Richard Dent, Dan Hampton. I mean, it was Otis Wilson. I mean, there was a ton of people at this show.
Pretty cool. What'd you get?
I got Ben Zobrist. It was for season ticket holder day. They have these season ticket holder days, and they give you usually a gift sometimes. And so I got this in 2017, but it was a picture of all the All-Stars in 2016. And so I have that signed right now. The Cubs had 6 All-Stars that year. I have it signed by Lester. I have it signed by Zobrist, and I have it signed by Dexter Fowler.
Okay.
So I'm missing a couple. I'm missing Arrieta, Bryant, and Rizzo. But and then I got Russell. I'm getting in November. There's a big show in Schaumburg or in Rosemont. So trust me, I got my fill of baseball.
All right. Well, the name of this episode is the Cubs slow start in 2023. So what we're going to do, we're going to hit a little rewind button. We're going to look back at April and May and go back to what things went right and what things went wrong during those couple of months for the Cubs.
And, Dustin, it's funny because everyone was so focused on the collapse in September, but you know what they say, losses count the same in April as they do in September. Mm-hmm. And, I when I looked at this, right, I was down in Mesa for spring training and we didn't know what to expect. A lot of new free agents on the team, some names you'll remember, some you won't, but, with Dansby Swanson and Cody Bellinger and Trey Mancini and Jameson Taillon and Eric Hosmer. And, you had a lot of people, that were on the team, and it seemed like most of the positions were set coming out of spring training, but remember that Seiya Suzuki had that oblique in spring training, and it left a question mark as who's to play right field while he recovered from his injury. And Dustin, I remember when we looked at the roster right before opening day when it was released, some things were absolutely what we expected, others were not. We knew that first base was going to be a combination of Trey Mancini and Eric Hosmer. We knew Nico would play second, Dansby short. Third base was going to be some combination of Patrick Wisdom, Nick Madrigal, and you remember Edwin Rios?
I do remember that name.
But I remember the first thing that was odd that we noticed was that the Cubs decided to carry 3 catchers, Yan Gomes, Tucker Barnhart, and Luis Torrens. And I never understood that Luis Torrens thing. That never made any sense. And then
I barely remember that name, to be honest with you.
Yeah, and he played for like 6 different teams this year. It was just goofy. But I guess, I'm sitting there and with that 3 catcher thing, I was like, well, don't they need more outfielders? Because, okay, Cody Bellinger is going to play center, Hap's going to play left. They didn't have a legit third outfielder on the roster. And that's what kind of, to me, was weird. They said, okay, we're going to go with Patrick Wisdom, Trey Mancini, and Miles Mastrobuoni.
Well, especially Trey Mancini out there. His legs were not underneath him. And he actually started off okay at the plate. Okay, I'm being generous, I'm sure. But I remember him out in right field, and it was just an absolute you-know-what show.
But, Dustin, it's
not his fault.
Right. Not at all. And that's the thing is that I've talked to a lot of different right fielders. I just was talking to Andre Dawson a couple of weeks ago. That's a hard outfield to play, like right field, like even for like a good outfielder or even a Hall of Famer Gold Glove outfielder. That's a tough field to play. And when you're a guy that isn't used to playing any right field, like Wisdom or Mancini or Mastrobuoni. I mean, it just didn't make sense. So, I think that the other real big surprise was Chris Morrell not being on the roster to start the season. But I think I'm probably in the minority here to say that I understood the move at the time. If you looked at his second half numbers of 2022 and just realizing he still had some work to do, and I was happy he got to get it done with John Maley down in Iowa. But I thought there were other options the Cubs could have done in right field, and they didn't do that. And Mike Tauchman was down there, Nelson Velasquez was down there. You had guys,
if anything, if in hindsight, I almost think that the Tauchman omission is more glaring than the Christopher Morrell omission. I don't think that Mike Tauchman developed down in spring training and beyond, having extra time there, right? Going down on the farm. Christopher Morrell, you can make that argument because, again, Christopher Morrell's position is still up for debate. He's an all or nothing kind of a batter. When he puts the ball in play, it's electric, right? He's electric on the bases. He's a great teammate. But I can't even understand that. But Mike Tauchman is the one which I don't really get. I think that's where, again, in the fact that they end up missing the postseason by this much, that's one where you could say, if you might have had Tauchman up here, that he might have won a game or two for you. Like, not personally, but had been involved in a game where they may have won instead of lost because they had a half-ass right fielder out there.
Right, and that's kind of what we're doing is looking here.
Mastrobuoni, how many Mastrobuoni starts in right field, right? I mean,
yeah, it's like 4 or 5, and so you're looking at this, and that was something like, again, weird that they wouldn't have had another outfielder on there, like a legit outfielder, and so when you had the rotation, you had Marcus Stroman would the opening day starter followed by Steele. And the Cubs had put together some good bullpens in the past, and I felt confident they could do it again. They just didn't know the roles. You had Brad Boxberger and Michael Fulmer were the big free agent signings. So you figured one of them would be the closer and one would be the setup. Julian Merriweather, we knew he had an electric arm. He was a waiver wire pickup. Assad was coming off an excellent WBC tournament. And Alzolay was coming back from injury, and Keegan Thompson and Michael Rucker rounded out the pen. That's what they broke with. But we also noticed at the time there was no lefty, right? That was supposed to be Brandon Hughes' job, but he's injured in spring training, so no lefties. So I thought all of that was, as we walked into the season, I just kind of was like, okay, well, let's see what happens. And even though the first series against the Brewers, the Cubs are going to win that one 4-0 behind Stroman. It was really, you started to see certain things pop up in that Milwaukee series that we would kind of see over and over again. I know that Justin Steele was in line for the win in game 2, but blown save by Assad and a tough play not made by Mastrobuoni. And you're talking about those little wins, right? They would lose that series, right? And so as you kind of move on there, they go on the road, they take on the Reds and they split there, but they do have their first double-digit victory. They'll have a lot of that. They'll win game 2, 12-5 before getting rained out. The Cubs had 2 series against teams with postseason aspiration, the Rangers and the Mariners. The Rangers still in it. Mariners just missed out. And they won both of those series. So we're kind of saying to ourselves, all right, looking good. But the Cubs lost the third game to the Rangers 8-2 with Jameson Taillon and Assad both struggling. And after the game, the Cubs made their first move of the season. Assad sent to Iowa and Nelson Velasquez was brought up. So they finally figured out, let's get a right fielder. And Nelson Velasquez was hitting the snot out of the ball in Iowa. But in what would be a pattern with David Ross, Velasquez wouldn't get much of an opportunity. Get this, Dustin. He comes in the first game against the Mariners as a defensive replacement in the 8th. And then in extras, he gets pinch hit for by Tucker Barnhart of all people. So he didn't even get a at-bat at that game. And of course, Barnhart would strike out. Nico would hit his first career walk-off to end that game. But then, right, Nelson Velasquez is given the start in the second game. Hayden Wesniewski was awful. He gave up 7 runs in 1.1 innings. But the Cubs came back, if you remember this, Dustin, 8-run third inning. Nelson Velasquez hits a grand slam that caused Wrigley to shake, and the Cubs would win this game 14-9 with Velasquez going 3 for 4 with 4 RBIs. But then with a chance to sweep in game 3, Ross goes with Mastrobuoni over Velasquez, and the Cubs lose 5-2. Like, how do you hit a grand slam and go 3 for 4
I'm
and
sure
not start the next game?
I'm sure the computer said that it was a bad pitching matchup. Right.
Yeah, and there's been some interesting articles about that based on some postseason managerial moves not related to the Cubs, but it's like you got to have some feel in these situations, and you see a guy go 3 for 4 with 4 RBIs, you give him the bat the next game, and so Nelson Velasquez, Dustin, in the month of April with limited bats went 7 for 20, 2 doubles, 3 home runs, 6 RBIs. He slashed 350, 435, and 900. So, I mean, he hits, he hits, 3 for 4, and then he sits for 12 games. And then when he comes back, he's still hitting. It made no sense. After the Seattle, the Cubs went on a West Coast road trip. They took 2 of 3 from the Dodgers and swept the Athletics. I don't know if you remember Patrick Wisdom, totally locked in. He hit 5 home runs in a 4-game span against the Dodgers and the Athletics, but the Cubs come back home, and the Dodgers got their revenge. They took 3 for 4 from the Cubs. Drew Smyly got the lone win with plenty of run support, a 13-0 victory. But the Cubs got back on track, taking 2 of 3 from the Padres. But Dustin, this is where things kind of start to sputter a little bit. After the Padres series, the Cubs were 3 games out of first and would start a 7-game road trip with 3 in Miami and 4 against the very lowly Nationals. I don't know what they finished the year at, but I know it was bottom 3. The Cubs would come back from that road trip, Dustin, 7-game road trip, with a record of 1-6. 5 of those 6 losses were by 1 run, losing 3 of 4 to Washington. Again, you might get mad at that Atlanta series at the end of the season, but losing 3 of 4 to Washington, that was just inexcusable, Yep.
Like you said in the beginning, and I've had this argument all the time. People are like, oh, it's just a game, and it's just a game in May, Dustin. What are you getting so wound up about? Because they all count the same. That's why.
Right. Now, they were able to return back home. They took 2 of 3 from Miami, but then they lost 2-3 to the last place Cardinals. If you remember, Wilson Contreras had just lost his starting job. Everything looked like a disaster there. But then they lost 2 of 3 to the Cardinals, and Wilson played a big role in those Cardinal victories. I hope we all learned our lesson not to boo Wilson Contreras. Right. He thrives on that. So next year, we all are in agreement, no booing Wilson Contreras. Just ignore him. As Dustin says, just take a sip of your drink and pretend like nothing's really happening. Now, after losing 2 of 3 to Cardinals, they would go back on the road and have another awful trip. They lost 2 of 3 to the Twins. They lost game 2 11-1 and game 3 16-3. The Twins scored 29 runs in their series victory over the Cubs, the most in any 3-game series at the Target Field since the ballpark opened in 2010. But this was the big one in this one, and you didn't know it at the time. But Brad Boxberger, who was signed as a potential closer setup man, gave up 3 runs in the second game, and he was put on the 60-day IL a couple days later with, you know the word, right forearm strain, and he would not be back until September. Dustin, I feel like Boxberger was a big part of their plans, and that just really hurt.
Yeah, absolutely. And we, have Tommy Hodavier every other Wednesday on Mully and Haw, and he was dying for one of these relievers at this point to take hold of the closer position because they didn't really have one. They were doing the closer by committee type of thing, and he was desperate for one of these guys to just go ahead and grab that position.
Right. And then after losing 2 of 3 to the Twins in ugly fashion, they got swept by the Astros in Houston. And if you remember, that's the one where Cody Bellinger in game 1, he makes an amazing catch against the wall, but he hurts his knee. A few days later, Mike Tauchman, the Palatine Pounder, would make his debut. But they finished the road trip losing 2 of 3 to the Phillies. So in that 9-game road trip, Dustin, they're 2-7. Now, back at Wrigley, the Cubs took 2 of 3 from the Mets before getting swept by the Reds, as Cincinnati would go on to win 12 straight games. So that was kind of the start of their streak, tying a franchise record. And the Cubs would finish May taking 2 of 3 from the Rays. So just not a great month. March and April, they were 14-13. And Dustin, I don't mind that as long as you can be 500 or above in April. Right. April in Chicago is not a fun place to play. I mean, I sit out in those games and I'm cold. I can barely, I'm shivering. How those players can hit a ball at 98 miles an hour or even warm up, it's just unbelievable. But going 14-13, I'll take that, no problem. But Dustin, in May, they were 10-18, and that's where those road trips were just awful. Losing, those games to Miami and Washington, that road trip. And the Cubs were 7 games out of it at this point, or 7 games below 500 and 5 games out of first place. But when I look at April and May, there was some good things, but Marcus Stroman and Justin Steele, Dustin, were the victim of some bad run support, especially Stroman. But Stroman started 12 games in the first 2 months, but he only had 5 wins despite having a 2.59 ERA. Justin also started 12 with 6 wins and a 2.65 ERA. So those were a formidable 1-2 combination, but you just couldn't get those guys runs,
Yeah, they did not get any support at all. Good point.
And then Smiley was a little less effective, but still good. He started 11 games, Dustin. How about this? 5 wins with a 3.15 ERA. I mean, I don't know what happened to this guy, but in April and May, he was fine.
I wonder if he would have been, big picture, like if you were keeping him around, maybe he's a bullpen guy and not a starter. Maybe he just ran out of gas. They used up all his good pitchers too early, too soon.
I mean, he's a starter. I mean, you should be able to go longer than 2 months. It's not like it's the first time he's done it or he just came out of the bullpen.
I'm just trying to come up with something, right?
I hear you. I hope that they can work out whatever it is. I'm sure they'll give him an opportunity to try to win a job, but as of right now, he didn't do himself any favors. But I'll tell you, when you talk about April and May, Jamison Tyone and Hayden Wesniewski were complete disasters. Remember, Wesniewski was amazing when he was called up in September of 2022, looked even better in spring training, won the job over Caleb Killian and Javier Assad. And he started 8 games and he only had 2 wins, no wins in May, and had a 4.35 ERA in those 2 months. How about Jamison Tyone? First year in a new city, and these guys are trying and all that stuff. He started 8 games. He didn't have a single win, and his ERA was 8.04. Absolutely awful. Just couldn't have been a worse start.
Tyone, he could not have had a worse start. I mean, he couldn't have had a worse start.
And the worst part about it is when Tyone starts doing good, then all of a sudden Smiley falls apart.
Right. Yeah.
And that's the issue.
No consistency. Yeah.
But we knew at the beginning, Dustin, that first base was going to be an issue. We were hoping Trey Mancini. I know I was a big, hey, this guy could be a comeback player of the year. I didn't know that the comeback player of the year was on the same team in center field, but I thought Trey Mancini was good, change of scenery, good guy from all accounts, and had good seasons over in Baltimore. You had Eric Hosmer to back him up a little bit, and then you had Matt Mervis in AAA ready to go, but that position continued to be a struggle until they moved Bellinger into first. But Mancini hit 253 with 3 home runs in April and May. Hosmer was hitting 234 with 2 home runs. And Matt Mervis, who was called up on May 5th, hit 188 with 2 home runs, sent back to Iowa on June 15th and never came back up. So that first base position, again, I think
even as we sit here today, right? Even as we sit here today, you don't know. The two corner infield spots, you don't know.
It really, truly is the reason you need Cody Bellinger back. It really, truly is, so that you could have PCA in center and you could have a Gold Glover at first base in Cody Bellinger. Lefty, I mean, it just checks so many boxes, and we just need this guy back. I think that Seiya's oblique injury, really cost the Cubs. We talked about Wisdom out there, Mastroboni out there, Mancini out there. That was just, I don't know what they were thinking on that. And I think that was so bad in the beginning, Dustin, that I feel like they kind of rushed him from that oblique injury. He didn't really, I think he only had like a couple starts in Iowa. So I don't know. I felt like that really affected the season. It affected Seiya long-term. I think in the short term, having those guys in right really hurt. And I thought some of the bench decisions were really bad. Like, we talked about Luis Torrens. He was cut on April 28th. Edwin Rios up and down a whole bunch. Nick Magical struggled out of the gate, and he was sent back to Iowa. One thing that's going to be consistent, Dustin, when we look at the troubles in April and May, are 1-run games. The Cubs were 5-10 in 1-run games. And like you said, the bullpen situation, it took them a long time to figure out the roles. Usually it takes like a month. Even at the end of May, they were struggling. You had Fulmer, Boxberger, Leiter, Merriweather, Alzolay. They were all used in the closer role like you said, by committee, no consistency. Keegan Thompson, he's a name that we don't mention a lot, but he took a big step back. If you remember 2022, Keegan and Justin Steele were the bright spots of that season. And obviously Justin Steele took one big step forward, but Keegan Thompson took one big step back. And then I think Brandon Hughes never got healthy starting the season on the IL. He's called up on April 15th, goes back on the IL April 29th, off the IL May 12th, back on the IL June 13th, and he never pitched for the big club the rest of the season. So that whole lefty issue is just something that would be something that would affect him. And after May, Dustin, we're going to get after, early on in June, you're going to get to 10 games under, and we did not wave the white surrender flag. We were still flying the W, but at that point in time, Dustin, we were definitely concerned.
It was very slim. The alerts were everywhere. It was not the greatest start for the Cubs, and I'm guessing that next podcast, Crawly, will have a little bit more fun reliving the June and July part of the Cubs 2023 season.
Absolutely. It was a blast.
You are listening to the Fly the W670 podcast. It's season 2. It's episode 77. We look back at the Cubs' slow start in 2023. In this segment, Crawly interviews baseball writer for the Tribune, talk about the similarities between the Brant Brown drop ball back in 98 and the Seiya Suzuki 2023 game. It's our guy, Paul Sullivan. He was at both those games and in the locker rooms for both those infamous games.
Joining me now on the Fly the W podcast, you recognize him from his writings with the Chicago Tribune, baseball writer extraordinaire, Paul Sullivan. How you doing, Sully?
Doing great. How are you, Crawly?
We were talking beforehand. It was a brutal end of the season. I know that you've been around for a while. A lot of collapses. I just think of, 98, they backed in, 2004. Would you put 2009 in that category as collapse? I don't know.
2009, I don't know. Were they leading? I know they were in it in September, and certainly it was a bad month, but I can't remember if they were leading or not.
Milton Bradley and some of those guys on that team that was just brutal. Where does this rank for you as far as all-time Cubs collapses?
Whoa, that's a tough one. I got to say it's near the top. 04 to me is still the quintessential collapse because that was self-inflicted, and that had probably the most talented team that didn't get into the playoffs that I've ever seen for the Bulls or for the Cubs. And 19 was bad too. The Craig Kimbrell game where he gave up the home runs, the Cardinals, 2 home runs. I think it was Molina and maybe Dijon. I can't remember. But that was a killer too. And that was obviously Joe Maddon's last year. But this one was totally unique to me because it just went on for so long. It was so slow, and they kept losing, but they weren't really losing a lot of ground. It seemed like the other teams weren't taking advantage of it until, like, obviously the last week in Atlanta and Milwaukee when everything went wrong. But when you think about it, it started I think September 7th or 8th. And it lasted like 3 weeks, and just some of the things that it was just unbelievable the way it ended. But it's a shame because it really was. Up until then, it was a pretty fun season.
Absolutely. I mean, I keep thinking how much fun the summer was, but when you talk about the strange events that happened in this collapse, the one thing, and you wrote about it in this great article in the Chicago Tribune called Chicago Cubs Blown Game in Atlanta is a Blast from the Past. And when I saw that, when we're watching that game 1, and it was Justin Steele, and he had a couple bad outings, and it looked like he righted the ship, and the Cubs had a lead, and all of a sudden, it was just a classic Cubs moment where you're just kind of holding your breath, holding whatever you can. That are they going to hold on to the game? And then you see that ball slicing towards Seiya, and it looks like he has it, and you're about to take a breath, and at the last second he drops it. And I did, like Ron Santo in 98, I yelled, "Oh no!" I mean, stunning.
Yeah, I was, of course, in the press box writing, and I actually stood up because I couldn't believe what I had just seen, because the TV monitors there you can't really see him from where I was sitting unless you stood up. So I immediately stood up because I couldn't tell what happened because it was right to him and he didn't seem to have any problem. And then I saw Maddie Lee from the Sun-Times, and she stood up, and both of us were like, what happened? And looked up at the screen and saw the replay, and, his wincing afterwards, like, squinting his eyes, that was very sad because it seemed like he lost it in the lights. You weren't sure if he was like, starting to cry. It was very weird. And then obviously had to start cranking out a story. So I don't even know if I watched any of the at-bats in the ninth inning by the Cubs, but I heard they were not good. And
No.
then the post game was just awful because, no one wanted to talk, and obviously Seiya had to talk, and he was just looked devastated, like there's tears in his eyes, and it was, like you said, your first thought was Brant Brown. Obviously, anyone who had gone through that, as I did, will always remember that game. And so then after that, I looked up the Brant Brown game story and kind of like did a little thing on the similarities and how Brant Brown reacted, how Seiya reacted, and it was really amazing how similar they were.
Yeah, and you were there in '98, and so when you're watching this in Atlanta, I mean, it has to be deja vu to you to kind of, for our younger listeners out there, the Cubs are looking to clinch the wild card, and same kind of situation, and Brant Brown's the left fielder, and it just clunks off his glove. I mean, this one, Seiya just completely whiffed it.
Yeah.
But it's shocking, like you said, how eerie. And when I read the article and I see the quotes from the teammates, you got Mark Grace in there, and you got the rat Gary Gaetti in there, and Rod the shooter Rod Beck, and then all these guys. I mean, it's remarkable. And you also have Pat Hughes, who called both games, about how eerie that was.
Yeah, I ran into Pat Hughes when I was coming up from the press box. The day of the Seiya game, and he was shaking his head, and we were like, because I thought that maybe we were the only two people in the media that were at both games. I could be wrong, but it seemed that way. Certainly I was the only reporter because I'm such an old guy and everything. But the difference to me, the main difference was that was a day game, of course, in Milwaukee, and afterwards, we had all the time in the world to wait for these guys. And back then it was a different atmosphere. The players all were willing to talk because they all wanted to have Brant Brown's back. And on this one, it didn't seem like too many were around to talk or even wanted to talk. But the ones that did, I think maybe Dansby, I can't remember who else, they definitely had Seiya's back. And like Seiya, Brant Brown was crying too, but he stood there and answered questions for a good 20 minutes, wave after wave of reporter, because all the TV people were up there as well, because that was still the Sammy Sosa home run race. So, I mean, that was the story, even as much as the Cubs playoff run was big, the Sammy home run thing was just as big. So, just two unbelievable occurrences, the linked by a missed fly ball, and that's just one of the things about Cubs history that's so great, that people can look back on past history and associate them together, even in a bad moment. I'm sure there's a lot of home runs that you look back on, the homer and the Gloman, and Sammy's home runs and stuff like that are similar. But you can also look back on the things that went wrong and say, oh yeah, well, I remember blah blah blah. And you don't really do that in football, I don't think. I mean, I don't watch a Bears game and say, oh, I remember when Kent Nix blew that game to the Broncos. So that's why you love baseball, right?
What did Lou Piniella call them? Cubby occurrences?
Cubby occurrences, yeah. It's a funny note. I was told once, I had mentioned Cubby occurrences so many times back then that one of my editors told me to stop writing about it, because you can't have every Cubby everything that goes bad, it could be a current, Paul, because, there's just too many things that go bad. And so I put it to rest for a few years, and then now I just bring it up every once in a while.
Well, that was definitely one, and I instantly thought of Ron Santo, and I thought Jim DeShays had that oh my goodness, I think for a certain generation of Cub fans that oh my goodness in that way, like I think for Jim DeShays that was probably his first Cubby occurrence. You know what I mean?
Oh, for sure. And Boog in the Seiya one, he had an 0-0 too. I heard. I wasn't watching because obviously I was at the game, but I saw the replay and he did an 0-0 as well. And I mean, that's your first reaction whenever you see a disaster. Oh no! And so we do have quite a grand history of 0-0s in the Chicago Cubs lore.
Now, you also wrote another article that I always enjoy. I'm still a newspaper guy. I still love getting my paper and reading the articles and stuff. And you wrote that all eyes are on manager David Ross in the Chicago Cubs stretch run. And the line that really just got to me is he could wind up National League Manager of the Year if the Cubs make it to the postseason. He could be savaged on social media if they don't. And I think we kind of understand that they obviously didn't. He's going to be he is being savaged on social media, but it's remarkable, Paul, how again, it's for people, I think maybe outside of Cub fandom that are just kind of watching on the outside, it's like, oh my God, look at the Cubs. They've come this far. David Ross turned them from 10 under to 12 over. But I think maybe social media just kind of changes things, but it's almost like you're looking and you're second guessing so much more. And there was a lot of odd decisions that kind of, especially in September, but throughout the year that had kind of fans wondering.
Yeah, I mean, it was weird. It's always going to be that way for Ross. I think it just there's always going to be a certain percentage of the fandom that doesn't like his moves, and he replies by saying, "Well, I'm the manager, you're not, and I'll make my moves that I'm going to make." He's kind of defensive about it, but he is the manager, so he does have that discretion. But I have to admit that even if you don't like his moves, some of the things people say on social media are just totally out of bounds. Like the game, I think it was the second game in Atlanta when they lost. Someone wrote, and this wasn't just like a 5 or 10 follower. This was a guy that had 1,000 or so followers or something like that. And he writes, David Ross has ruined my life. And like, if your life is that shallow that it can be ruined by a loss in a baseball game that you have nothing to do with, then you need to really look into your life and, what you've done wrong to this point, because, it's entertainment. It's not life or death. I'm sure it's upsetting to people when the Cubs lose. But, you can blame the manager. Every manager goes through the same thing. They get blamed. But, really, even the Cub t-shirt company, what's it called? Obvious shirts. They had one. It wasn't anti-Ross, but it was like, oh, this is the end of, I can't believe this is happening to us. So like, you're a t-shirt company that made a ton of money off of the Cubs. Shut up and take your money and run. Don't be like acting like this is the end of the world. It's a bad streak, and you're gonna live. We'll all survive. We've gone through this before. Just the angst when the Cubs lose a game sometimes is just so over the top. And honestly, it's why a lot of friends of mine that are Sox fans hate the Cubs because of that.
What did Joe Maddon say? Take 30 minutes to celebrate a win, 30 minutes to mourn a loss, and then move on?
Exactly. I mean, we've had some of the most unbelievable crushing defeats in history. I mean, the Game 6 and 03, the Seiya game, the Brant Brown game, 69 Cubs. I mean, you can just go on and on.
The Gatorade glove?
What's that?
The Gatorade glove?
The Gatorade glove, Rhino in the 84. Oh, I mean, it's just staggering. But we always come back. I mean, it's not the end of the world. It's just a terrible moment in your sporting life. And, you get over it. Just the drama, just like, oh, this could only happen to me. No, it happens to other teams too. You just don't know their history.
Now, when you were
You're not
there,
like that, are you, Crawly?
yeah, it takes me like a beer or two to get back on my
Okay, a
horse.
beer or
But
two is fine. But stay off social media and just learn to live. It's not the end of the world.
Yep. And you were there the other day, or when Jed Hoyer had his as far as his end of the year press conference. What did you take away most from that press conference? What did you walk away thinking, really kind of stood out in your head?
I don't know. What surprised me was him saying that they're going to look at everything under a microscope to see what went wrong, because you don't really need a microscope. We all saw what went wrong. The bullpen obviously was not strong enough and could not afford to have the closer injured. The players were fatigued because Ross played them all down the stretch, almost every day, all of his regulars, because he didn't really trust his bench, and nor maybe he shouldn't have, because his bench had like Pete Crow Armstrong and Canario and Master Boney, and it wasn't a very strong bench. So they could have had a better bench if they had some thought about that at the trade deadline, which of course they were just trying to survive then, I guess. But he pointed out, he said, well, we're going to look at this under a microscope. And then he pointed out basically the main reasons why they went under. But the only thing I think that he left out was that some of the roster decisions that he made also contributed to that. Because if you had signed someone like, I don't know who, but if you didn't have to have Mancini, Hosmer, Rios, guys like that, Barnhart, he signed some players that weren't even there at the end of the year and forced them to go to these kids, and it hurt their depth. So if he had some better signings in the offseason, maybe they wouldn't have had to go through that.
Now, he also mentioned in that press conference that, for Dave Ross, I mean, he's under contract until 2024, and I think they have a team option for 2025. I mean, how much do you feel that he's going to be on the hot seat, if at all?
I don't know. It's a different thing with Ross. I mean, he's definitely on the fans' hot seat, and he'll probably be on maybe some of the betting line hot seats, but I don't get the impression that the Cubs are anywhere close to, putting the finger on him for any of this. If they get off to a bad start, maybe we'll hear something. But I really think Jed wants to pick up that option, just to take that off his back and not to, no one wants to go into a lame duck year in this day and age, just because of the media and Twitter and everything, and it'll be daily speculation, about you losing your job. But that's what options are about. So I would hope that they would make him win before they pick it up, but I really think that they really want to pick it up.
Well, Sully, I appreciate you jumping on, and our listeners can follow you they can read your articles in the Chicago Tribune, either print or digital. Where can they find you on the socials?
I'm on Twitter, or X as they call it, some people, at PW Sullivan, and the same address on I don't even remember the other day, Threads. Threads or Thread. Yeah. And I also post some photos on Instagram at PW Sullivan, same thing, but I don't really write much on there. So, but Sully, you can get me at the Tribune anytime, and I appreciate it, Crawly. You hang in there. I'll see you at the Cubs convention.
Absolutely, sir. And thank you so much for another great year of great coverage. I've been, like I said, reading your stuff forever, just always enjoyable, and you do a great job, Paul. Appreciate you jumping on.
Thanks a lot.
This is the Fly the W670 podcast. Don't forget to listen, download, review, and subscribe to the Fly the W podcast. It's season 2. It's episode 77. Cubs slow start in 2023. Crawly, we got some news and notes to share with the audience.
Yeah, I told you I went to go see Joe Maddon this weekend in Schaumburg. Take a look. I have this for those of you subscribing to the Fly the W podcast on 670 The Score's YouTube channel. This is a replica scorecard. They gave us these as season ticket holders in 2017, but I got all of them signed by Joe Maddon.
That's cool. That's
right
cool.
where it says manager's signature. I got him to do all 7 of them. So pretty cool. But Odyssey baseball insider Bob Nightingale reported that former Cubs manager Joe Maddon, quote, wants to manage again and is telling friends he'd love to manage the Mets and is hoping for at least to interview for the opening. I don't think there's any surprise, Dustin, that Joe wants to manage again. And New York, Joe, he's a big city kind of guy, a cultured man, all that stuff. I would love, as much as it would hurt me to see it, I would love to see Joe having that opportunity to manage again. And we talked about this, about the computers and about the numbers and losing the feel for the game as far as managers being able to make decisions based on the human element. And I think that the game of baseball is better when Joe Maddon's in it. I'd love to see him get a shot, but we'll see what happens.
Yeah, I can't argue with you there that the baseball's better with Joe Maddon in it. I'm surprised he didn't do more media. He did a little bit of stuff with the MLB Network, and he had the podcast going on. But the podcast seemed to lose a little bit of steam, too, as the year went on.
It's got to be one of those things you and I know this more than anyone. You got to be consistent about it, otherwise,
right.
people don't tune in.
But, so I mean, there was a lot of they seemed to be getting a lot of buzz. Like they had some good guests on, they had created some news, they had some good people talking, and then all of a sudden, like when we got into like the heart of the season, it just felt like it fizzled and went away. Yeah,
like I said, if you don't keep it consistent, it's hard for people to kind of get hooked. You know what I mean? So we'll see what happens. And like I said, it would be fun to see him back in there. And I keep reading about this, about managers and how their salaries have gone down and down and down. And basically all you got is a bunch of young guys now that, aren't making a lot of money and are just thankful to have the opportunity, but they're under the, they have the front office basically breathing down the neck every second. And they don't really have the, it's not like a Joe Maddon or a Tony La Russa or, one of those guys that has that history that they can kind of push back a little bit.
Yep, absolutely. I saw something by Nightingale about the managers and the pay structure right now.
Absolutely. Now, Cody Bellinger was named as one of 9 finalists for the NL Hank Aaron Award, which recognizes the most outstanding regular season offensive performer in each league. But Dustin, it is a stacked category. As much as I love Cody Bellinger, he's going up against the human highlight reel, or at least montage reel if he's playing the Cubs. Ronald Acuña's on there, Matt Olson, Corbin Carroll, Mookie Betts, Freddie Freeman, Luis Arias, Bryce Harper, and Juan Soto.
That's tough company. Yeah, that's tough company.
Who do you like out of those, Dustin, if you're looking at those 9?
Well, I mean, I don't like him, but I think it's Ronald Acuña, right? Like maybe Juan Soto, but kind of quiet for him out west. Matt Olson, even though the guy hit 54 home runs, kind of a quiet 53. Just Ronald Acuña does it with a flair, and they were the team that won the most games in baseball. So I mean, I think it's Ronald Acuña. You?
I think Acuña's up there. Like it's so hard. This is just like a killer. I mean, you can.
I think all these guys out west kind of hurt each other a little bit as far as votes go, right? The Carroll, the Betts, Freddie Freeman, Soto. I think that all kind of take away from each other. I just think it just seems obvious to me that it's Acuña.
I do, but I'm just telling you, I was so impressed with Corbin Carroll. I know he's not going to get it. But oh my God, was that kid is just amazing. And like you said, Matt Olson is like,
he's going to win one of these years. I'll predict that.
Nice. I like it. All righty. Well, the Arizona Fall League is in full swing. And for you Cub fans, that means rooting for the Mesa Solar Sox. We talked about them last season. We'll talk about them again this off season. But if you are an MLB subscriber, and I don't know if everyone realizes, if you're a season ticket holder for the Cubs, you automatically get the MLB package. But you can now watch the games, and it's really easy to find the Solar Sox if you are if you are someone that has the MLB package. But, if you remember when we talked last season, the Solar Sox are some of the top prospects from the Cubs, Orioles, Yankees, A's, and Astros. So all these teams combined, there's 6 teams in the league, and each of the teams send 2 or 3, anywhere from like 5 to 8 guys to get a little bit of extra baseball. And so just some notable names for Cub fans out there. You got infielders James Triantos and Carter Trice, outfielders Kevin Alcantara and Christian Franklin, and pitchers Adam Lasky, Jose Romero, Nick Hull, Chris Keckman, and Tyler Santana. Obviously, I think the 2 that would interest Cub fans the most is watching what James Triantos does and Kevin Alcantara. Kevin Alcantara's kind of made his name known. He did unbelievable in Myrtle Beach, was crushing it up in South Bend, and then made it to the postseason with the Tennessee Smokies late edition and just did really, really well on that. Another outfielder that's just phenomenal. James Triantos is a guy that gets forgotten. And as much as, Dustin, we talk about the third base position being one of question, James Triantos is a guy that's just really, really young, like, drafted out of high school. Just someone to kind of keep an eye out as far as third basemen are concerned. But, if you're like me and you're jonesing for some baseball and you need a little bit more than what the postseason's offering you, because they got a lot of days off in these postseason, the AFL is a fun league to kind of be watching, and you get to see a lot of stars from other teams as well.
All right, speaking of the postseason, let's do a little divisional series updates. Let's start off with the ALDS, Texas versus Baltimore. So the Rangers versus the Orioles, and kind of a surprise outcome to start this thing off.
You remember I said I predicted the all Texas ALCS is what I predicted.
Yes,
here's the thing. In game 1, it was a pitcher's duel. Dane Dunning versus Kyle Bradish. The Rangers scored 2 in the 4th, and then the Orioles responded with 1 in the bottom of the inning. Both teams score 1 run in the 6th, and the Rangers win this one. Close one, 3-2. Great game. Game 2, no pitchers duel. Grayson Rodriguez versus Jordan Montgomery. Baltimore got out to an early 2-0 lead before Texas scored 5 in the 2nd and 4 in the 3rd to go up 9-2. The Orioles tried to come back, but they fell short, losing 11-8 as the series moves to Texas. But a couple things stand out, Dustin. Number one, how awesome was it to see, the Orioles fan base that fired up? You saw the pictures, you saw it on TV.
Yeah, I felt bad. The first game was under a rain delay, so that kind of stunk for them.
It was, yeah, absolutely. But I mean, I like when you get to see one of these teams come back that haven't been there in a long time.
Haven't been there in a long time, right? These other teams are kind of the usual suspects so far, right?
Right.
Maybe outside of Arizona, maybe, but the other teams have been there a lot lately.
Yeah, when you and I were predicting this, the one thing I kind of thought is I felt like Texas had a little bit more experience, older guys, you know what I mean, that veteran experience in the postseason.
Yeah,
and
Orioles bats are still young. Not a ton of great starting pitching, and what they do have is young. So
right. Yeah. Mm-hmm. That's why I predicted it the way I did. Now, Astros versus Twins, I thought this was going to be another 2-game win for the Texas teams. But not to be. Game 1, Justin Verlander versus Bailey Ober. Houston jumps out to an early 5-0 lead. Yordan Alvarez, 3 RBIs. The Twins made a big push in the scoring 4 in the 7th. But they fall just short as the Astros hang on to win this one 6-4. But game 2, Framber Valdez versus Pablo Lopez. The Twins are going to take this one 6-2.
That's what was surprising. That's surprising.
The Carlos Correa revenge game. He went 3 for 4 with 3 RBIs as Minnesota would win this one 6-2. And so when you talk about when you don't have home field advantage, what do they say? Split and head home. And that's exactly what they did. They split. And so
and then they get an afternoon. That's an afternoon game tomorrow.
Yeah. It's going to be exciting. NLDS, Dustin, LA versus the Snakes. I told you this was a team. I said, I want Arizona, and boy, oh boy, Clayton Kershaw versus Merrill Kelly. Clayton Kershaw got only 1 out. He's knocked out after the first inning. He couldn't even get through the first inning. He gave up 6 runs. The Diamondbacks scores 9 runs in the first 2 innings, and the Dodgers go on to lose this one 11-2. I mean, Dustin, there's no doubt that Clayton Kershaw is a Hall of Famer. No doubt. But the question is going to be, is he a first ballot Hall of Famer, and this postseason stuff is always going to come back to haunt
Well,
him.
he could be a first ballot whiny bitch Hall of Famer. Hear him complaining about, "Ooh, I have to start on Saturday and there's college football on, and I like to watch college football." So I mean, can you imagine being a Dodgers fan and before the series starts, he's belly aching about the fact that he's going to miss college football games on top? Hey, Clayton, DVR it, man. Put your phone away. Focus in on the snakes and catch the action afterwards. Give me a break. Oh, the college football games. I got to start a baseball game. Go pitch for the Rockies then, and you won't have to worry about being in the postseason. You can pull a Chris Bryant.
I will tell you, when you watch Clayton Kershaw, and I remember so clearly 2016 and the number the Cubs did on him in Game 6. And after that Rizzo home run, seeing him spin around dejected, like his face in his hands, I don't know what it is. I'm not going to say he's not mentally tough because clearly, again, he didn't get as good as he did. If you look back at the numbers, a guy that reminds me of him is Greg Maddux a little bit, wasn't the greatest postseason performer. He did get one World Series ring, but when you think about those teams that the Braves had in the 90s, with that core pitching staff, of Smoltz and Glavine and Maddux, the fact that they only won one World Series to me just still shocks me to this day. But and then Dustin, I know you were excited about this Braves Phillies. I took the Braves. You took the Phillies. I want to say on this.
Yeah.
Ranger Suarez versus Spencer Strider. Phillies scored 2 runs off Spencer Strider, and Brian Stott had an RBI single. And how about Bryce Harper with a solo home run? Ranger Suarez and the bullpen, they don't allow any runs. They win 3-0. But Dustin, the Phillies used 7 pitchers in this game.
Yeah, well, they knew they wanted to win that game, right? They took advantage of it. I think the Braves are probably a really good play tonight. I don't know that anybody is going to get the podcast before the Braves and Phillies go later on tonight, but just between you and I, if I was betting on this game, I would bet the Braves tonight. I still like to pull for Schwarber. I mean, that's kind of why I'm where I'm at with the Phillies, but I think tonight the Braves are basically almost in like a must-win situation too.
Right, and what you're talking about is you got Schwarber, you got Castellanos, you got Craig Kimbrell. So there's a little bit of a Cub connection. But Dustin, I heard a lot of people saying, and I heard you guys this morning on the Mully and Haw show when I always tune in the morning, talking a little bit about whether the bye in the first round maybe affects some teams.
Well, and especially before it was just one day, right? It was like a 2 or 3 day break. Now it's a full week that the teams like the Braves, like the Dodgers, like the Astros, like the Orioles are off. And the Diamondbacks, as an example, the Diamondbacks have been playing playoff baseball for like the last 3 weeks or a month, right?
Right.
To get in and everything. Texas, kind of the same way. So, I mean, it matters, I think. I really do think it matters.
I mean, here's the thing. What do they say? Correlation doesn't equal causation. I think it's too small of a sample size when you've just seen 2 season. You know what I mean? This is the second season that they're doing it. And there's just so many factors in postseason baseball is not really like regular season baseball. And I would like it more if there was less day offs. There shouldn't be 1 day and then a day off. I mean, it should literally be 1, 2 day off and then continue on. That's
I the schedule. The scheduling always drives me crazy. If you're going to be afraid of the NFL, as an example, on yesterday, then be afraid of the NFL and don't play. You could have played 4 games on Saturday, and you could have played 4 games on Monday, because I guarantee those games did terrible in the ratings. Those American League games, they did terrible in the ratings. And I bet that the 4 games against 1 Monday Night Football game, that they would do okay. Football's still going to win, but they would have a chance where they had no chance on Sunday. 0.
To me, it's just continue on with the games like you would, because when you have all these breaks, when they're not
leaving cities, they don't need a travel day. When you're not moving, right? The first 2 games are in LA. Play the games back to back. Then yes, you should get a travel day after that, of course. But
absolutely.
I mean, it's goofy.
But see, that allows you that allows you to do what the Phillies did, get a lead and then just start throwing every arm you have out there.
Right. Because they know what's up tomorrow. Right. They know that they've got a full day off.
Right. So you're a bullpen arm. You pitch one inning, you're done, and then you have a day to relax. And that's not right. But when you, I think that to me is more of an issue than having that week off. When you look at some of these things in the postseason, sometimes you have teams that just get red hot. We talked about that, about the Diamondbacks. Other times, like I said, with the Orioles, you got an inexperienced team. Was it because they had a week off, or was it because they just, the moment was pretty big and Texas had been there before, not too worried about it? The Astros, they split with the Twins. The Astros had a week off and they took game one, and so I'm looking at that one. And then, like I said, Arizona's hot as heck, and Clayton Kershaw has a bad postseason record. So was it because they had a week off, or Clayton Kershaw just melts every time he gets in the postseason and the D-backs are just a hot team? And then again, I know you didn't like the interleague teams playing against each other, but the Braves and Phillies know each other. You know what I mean? It's not like, I don't think a week off helped the Braves. I just think that all of a sudden it was a close game.
Yeah, and they
got a run, and then they just completely bullpenned it out. And that's what I don't like. I just wish that they didn't have, like I said, unless it's a travel day, you're playing the next game.
The other thing that I think is totally unfair is the start times based on what they think about the markets and the matchups. Totally unfair. Now, I don't think the Dodgers and the Diamondbacks, as an example, should start, anytime before 1 o'clock at the earliest on the West Coast. But on Tuesday, the Astros and Twins play a day game. And on Wednesday, the Astros and Twins play another day game. That's not right.
No.
That's not right. And then if they need games on Friday, guess what? Minnesota is playing the Astros on Friday at 3:07. So why can't you play a game later? And it's at Houston. So why couldn't Texas is playing Baltimore at 7? Why couldn't they start at 8 in Houston? Why do they have to have the exclusivity? Why does TBS have to have the 2 games one night and FS1 the 2 games the next night? These are things that I think you could make more common sense out of it, right? It's Friday, another day game, so they're going to play three potential of the Twins Astros game, probably 4 if you go back to the first game was the early game too. So
and
4 of their 5 games are day games.
And this goes back to what I'm saying, where most teams never play day game, for the most part. It's like,
right, and they're not used to it, and it's all based on what they think about the ratings and what they think about the markets.
And not what's best for the game. And that drives you nuts sometimes when you see it. And then you have like a weird start time. And then all of a sudden there's these weird shadows and all sorts of other goofy stuff that make it tougher to play the
shadows
game.
become a thing for sure. But then, God forbid, on a Saturday or a Sunday, they actually played a game at 3:00 in the afternoon where somebody in junior high might be able to stay up and watch a game. Oh, no. If it's Saturday or Sunday, once we get to the AL and NLCSs and, of course, the World Series, no game will start before 8:00.
Right. So there's definitely
absolutely ridiculous.
There's definitely things to improve on, but I would say as far as the baseball goes, there's been some pretty good series, and I think they're going to continue. And looking forward to some baseball tonight. Braves and Phillies about to get underway. So, like you said, hopefully somebody's got some bets on that. And again, I'm not the biggest Diamondback fan, but I'm also not the biggest Dodger fan. But I saw what the Snakes did, man, and I feel they're going to continue to make a run.
Well, Crawly, that's a wrap. Don't forget to listen, download, review, subscribe to the Fly the W podcast. Follow us on the socials. We're on Facebook. We're on Instagram. Of course, we're on Twitter. You can also email us, flythew670@gmail.com. And you can watch us, see all of Crawly's cool memorabilia and some bobbleheads by watching us on YouTube, by subscribing to the 670 The Score YouTube channel. Crawly, have a good start to the week, and we'll get back together on Thursday.
Absolutely. Don't forget to leave those 5-star reviews, and we'll be here for all your breaking news. Go Cubs! Hey guys, it's Crawly. Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed this video, please don't forget to give it a thumbs up and subscribe to our channel for more content like this. If you want to see more of our videos, be sure to check out our playlist and let us know what you think in the comments below. Also, don't forget to follow us on social media to stay up to date with our latest episodes. Links are in the description. Thanks again for watching, and we'll see you in the next video. Go Cubs!